Hi guys, Bill again. I was watching those trained monkeys trying to stop Dr. Farrell speaking the other night, and I felt a wee shiver of deja vu. I came home in the summer of '91 after the first Gulf War, and there were weenuses like that everywhere. My hometown, the town I was based, when we took the bikes down on a run down to Eastbourne or Brighton. They even ruined a night out in Cardiff. The Student Union, the Socialist Workers' Party, Militant, and at least half a dozen other champagne socialist cabals. When I was in uniform, they spat baby killer at me, right in my face. Baby killer! Where'd they get that from? They were watching some kind of Vietnam film or something. They knew I wasn't going to do anything. There's no way I was going to disgrace my uniform by reacting to them. But they weren't quite so brave when I was in my civvies. They usually kept well out of arm's reach when they're whining about oppression and unlawful invasions. But you get one by itself and it pretty quickly became clear they had no fucking clue about recent Persian history. I mean, some of them didn't even seem to know that Kuwait was invaded first, before we kicked the Iraqis out. But this is the thing. Their worldview is that evil capitalist pigs invaded a peace-loving ancient culture and murdered all their children. The end. Patriarchy. Penis. When I took my place in the line, it was to defend Queen and Country. There were occasions when that meant that we had to visit violence upon the enemies of the Crown, and I'm not proud of that. But I'm not ashamed of it either. Largely because, the last time I checked, babies aren't the Queen's enemy. If it ever looked like we were running the risk of hitting a civilian, we held our fire. Even when we were being shot at by cowards using civilians as meat shields, we held our fire. Now my conscience might not be clear, but it doesn't have the hideous crimes those precious little snowflakes want to heap on it. But 91 wasn't my first experience of the toffee-nosed Trotskyists either. I think like a lot of us, I grew up knowing that the world was going to end real soon. The Cold War couldn't stay cold indefinitely. So, like any young man would, I got off my arse and decided to do something about it. Britain's biggest nuclear base is within walking distance of Glasgow, so getting rid of that thing would be a good start. Yeah, if the Reds didn't have a military target near my family, then my family could escape the tactical stage of the big one. So, enter the campaign for nuclear disarmament stage left. The very first meeting I attended was a bit of an eye-opener. I didn't talk about disarmament much, but there was a whole lot of talk about class struggle, about how the capitalist patriarchy was suppressing the workers of the West. There's lots of talk about oppression. Oppression by these evil Americans. And there was even one plummy-voiced wee prick that went off on one about how there's a glass ceiling right over my head. Now I couldn't see that glass ceiling, but it was still there, and it made sure that I'd never be anything better than a worker drone slaving away for the state. Okay, anybody want to call bollocks right now? Yeah, it'll take the ranty part of the video out. No? Okay. The thing is, I know all about glass ceilings. There were no student loans in the early 80s in Scotland. The bursary that I was offered wouldn't have covered my bus fares, much less given me my study materials, a place to stay and something to eat for the next 3 years. So I didn't get to go to university. I did get to pay almost a third of the pittance that I was called wages. And that paid towards the education of these moneyed marxists, telling me about how they were going to liberate me from capitalist oppression. I stuck it out for a while. I mean, after all, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? But one night I made the mistake of asking about our siblings on the other side of the Iron Curtain. Now, as an aside, I've since discovered that there was and is a highly successful Russian anti-nuclear organisation, but they weren't anything to do with the champagne socialists sat up in front of me. After the shocked silence and my comrades shuffling uncomfortably away from me, I had the pleasure of being harangued for about 10 minutes solid on how fine and great the socialist workers' revolution in the Soviet Union was. Russia wasn't a territorial nation. They didn't invade countries like the way the imperialist Americans did. And then I asked about Poland and Finland and Lithuania and Hungary. Silence, peon! You are an unwitting tool of the capitalist patriarchy. Your heretical speech betrays your brothers in the glorious international workers' movement. Yeah, fair enough. Me and CND parted ways. I stopped buying Socialist Worker. I stopped nipping my dad's head about how we were all unwitting tools of the filthy imperialists. And I realised that those silver-spooned monkeys just weren't fit to polish Keir Hardie's battered old boots. But since surrendering to the Soviets didn't really fit my plans either, I had to do something. So I did what any other young man would do. I got myself a uniform and I took my place in the line. Now, here in Britain we don't have the checks on state control and power that, say, Americans do. So we tend to keep an eye on people. And it wasn't too long after that I was on the fringes of a surveillance operation which was tasked to follow some of the Aldermasters and protesters. These fuckers were just back from Moscow. Now, I'm all for freedom of movement, but visiting the capital of the Soviet Union while you're in direct opposition to a vital link in the West deterrent force? Really? Times change. I made some good friends in the Wojenno-Morski Flot, Rossiyski Federacji. That's the Russian Navy. Last time I was up in Severomorsk, and apologies for the pronunciation by the way. They were great lads, really good boys, even if they did try and kill me with vodka. Fucking Russian naval infantry, man. There's something badly wrong with them, by the way. When you go to a bar and they charge you more for a bottle of beer than they do for a half litre of premium vodka, you know you're in trouble. Anyway, those CND clowns, by undermining the West defences, they could have removed the deterrent factor, and they could have made a war between our side and Man Opos a lot more likely. And a word to the wise, I don't care how hard you think you are, don't fuck with the Russians. It's not going to end well for you. Now, either my former comrades hadn't thought it through, or more likely, they just didn't care. What I'm getting at though is, does any of this sound familiar? Patriarchy, glass ceilings, a worldwide struggle against the West, and leadership. You know, the same leadership taking us into the most prosperous era in human history. You know, Marxism, radical feminism, is there really that much of a difference? The last time this happened I put a uniform on. This time I'm just going to talk. Not to those champagne socialists up in the panel though. I'm going to talk to the boys and girls in the audience. These people are nutters. We're not being oppressed. There's no struggle going on. The world has got problems, but we can address them without going into Marxism or feminism or any other kind of ism. We're people. We're good at being people. So let's concentrate on that. We can help each other along. We can share the load. And we can even have some fun while we're doing it. Laters, people.